There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. Taping this on Christmas Eve in order to fit it in around all the Christmas week goings on. And ready to talk to you. Got stories, got books to tell you about, got Yuletide zippity-doo-dah. So hope we all had a good Christmas. And I won't talk about mine retrospectively when it hasn't happened yet. That would just give me an existential inner ear imbalance or something. I expect I did have a good Christmas. Yeah, so lots of news. Kenji flew to Tokyo. He's back home. My old high school friend Randy, who apparently watches many of my videos, hi Randy, came for a visit for a couple nights. And Kenji was planning to take a taxi because his flight left at 7:30, so he wanted to leave the house at 5 a.m. Sunday morning. So I asked Randy, could we use you as backup if the taxi doesn't arrive? And he said, oh, for God's sakes, of course I'll just drive him. Don't book a taxi. So we did that, and then had a lovely time with Randy. There'll be more about him in a little bit in the book portion of this video. But we did some shopping. We went to an antique show with my mom. My mom's friend has a booth in this kind of antique market where various people have little booths in the store. And that was fascinating. And then that night I was too tired. We were thinking of going out to a movie or something, inviting some people over to drink with us. But no, I was pretty low ebb. So what we did was we watched old TV shows. We thought it was an episode of Gilligan's Island, but it was actually a Gilligan's Island movie. And it was so bad that we were enjoying watching it. It was just the acting and everything. Oh, my God. And then we realized it was a movie, and it was going to go on for another 30 or more minutes. We abandoned that, and then we went to Golden Girls, which is always trustworthy. And that made me want to show Randy all of my favorite Betty White short videos or talk show interviews or some outtakes from that last sitcom she was in, which I think was her best work when she was 90, 91, 92. And what was that called? Something in Seattle or something in Detroit. Anyway, I don't think the show's probably very good, but she's wonderful in it, and made him watch some of that. He enjoyed it. And I have been really quite affected by the Rob Reiner and Mrs. Reiner, I don't know her name, that murder. That's just really affected me. It's made me nostalgic for All in the Family, which is the best TV show I think ever made. My God, does that stand up compared to Gilligan's Island? And I want to watch, I have only seen a very few of the movies Rob Reiner directed. Stand By Me, and maybe, I think I've seen When Harry Met Sally. I haven't seen any of the others, I don't think. So I'm feeling nostalgic to watch some of those while Kenji's away, because he will not watch movies with me. I'm not that into movies. Kenji only watches zombie movies, and he won't humor me by sitting there with me. So while he's away, I might watch some movies, maybe with Mom or by myself. But I digress. But I had seen a clip of a really powerful scene from All in the Family between Edith and Michael, the Rob Reiner character, where her friend who was a drag queen, and this was a 1977 episode, absolutely revolutionary. And I had never seen this episode, but there was a short clip from it, and he was gay bashed. It was a gay bashing murder of her drag queen friend. And she was inconsolable, and it was at Christmas, and it spoiled Christmas, and she couldn't even sit down and say grace because she was so angry at God. So she rushes off in tears to the kitchen, and Michael comes in. If I find that, I'll put a link to it. And I'll also put a link because it was so powerfully acted. It just ripped my heart out. And so I dug around on YouTube and on Wikipedia to find out whether I could watch the full episode. And I found it. It was a video that has all 4 of those episodes with that drag queen character. And Randy and I watched the last 2 of those 4 episodes and loved them. And then I got him into, he didn't know Miriam Margolyes, and we watched a whole bunch of them. So we had a lovely night. But the other exciting news, I did get my Christmas present from Mom early. My mom got me a lovely big treadmill so that I don't just sit on my ass and read all day, but that I'll at least get up 3 times a day, hopefully more, and get on the treadmill and do some audiobooking. So that was incredible, wonderful gift. I won't tell you the story because it'll make me too angry to retell it about the delivery of that thing. But suffice it to say, it was a nightmare. It was the worst customer service experience of my life. And then it was in pieces, so we knew it would go downstairs. But what we hadn't reckoned on was that the base of this treadmill was maybe 200 pounds. I'm not sure how much it was, but Kenji and I couldn't lift it. So my burly brother-in-law and his son came over, got it down the stairs. And the other thing, in terms of my bookish priorities, once I realized how big it was, I didn't want it to go down in my library because it would swallow up most of the remaining bookshelf space in that large room. And the whole point of having this room as being dedicated to the library is that I can expand not into infinity, but expand several more shelves would go down there. And this would severely curtail that expansionary possibility. So I wondered if it would fit around a very sharp corner into my storage room, and those guys managed to get it in there, and so that's where my treadmill is, and I am so happy. But Mom's handyman friend, the same guy that hung all the pictures in the mirror a few months back, he came over and put it together, and I've never commented publicly, but I remember I once made a Friday Reads, I don't know if it was here or upstairs, where several of you noticed the chirping of the smoke detector, which means it's got to be replaced or the battery's got to be replaced. And that situation had been going on for 3 months, 4 months. First, we got the wrong kind of smoke detector. The handyman came over and, no, that isn't going to work. And so now, all these days or weeks later, we had the right one. So he came over, installed it, put my treadmill together. I was happy as happy can be. But then I had a nap, and when I got up from the nap, I thought, what is that chirping? The new smoke detector is chirping? What the heck? And this is the confounding part. This is going to be a Sean story I will tell, not my grandchildren, I'm not going to be any of those, but to tell for the rest of my days. When I came down to investigate, I noticed that it was a much fainter beeping sound. It was really not that offensive. I could almost ignore it. But when I came and stood under the newly replaced smoke detector right there, the sound wasn't coming from there. It felt like it was coming from in the living room. And I'm going, there's no other smoke detector in the living room. And then I thought, was it coming from the smoke detector downstairs? No. Is it coming from the one up in the second floor? No. What the hell? And so then I thought, maybe it's a ventriloquist smoke detector. Because it was coming, the sound was in here. And so what? So this went on all night and the next day. And yesterday morning, I finally was standing in the living room when I heard it again, and I realized what the hell it was. Any guesses? What do you think? What's the solution to this mystery? It was the old smoke detector, which the handyman guy had put in a box, and it was sitting on the table there, and it was still beeping. And because it was in the box, it was a very weak sound. And I have tried everything to get it to turn off. It will not turn off. So right now, that superannuated smoke detector is in the freezer in my refrigerator, because that's the only way I can get the sound out of my space. I love that story. But I remember there were a couple of comments on that video. One person said, you need to replace your smoke detector. And the other one, I think it was Angelia, said, I was watching your video and then I turned it off and spent a long time going through my house looking for which smoke detector needed to be replaced. And then I realized it was on your damn video. Thank you very much. So that should be not a thing for the foreseeable future. All right, I have finished 2 books and started 2. I finished the book I was reading to Mum, and this, I got to get this old price tag off it one of these days. Lucy Maud Montgomery short story collection called The Doctor's Sweetheart and Other Stories. And it was collected after she died. This edition, 1979. I think that's when it was first published. And these stories were written between 1899 and 1935. I didn't bother looking at the table of contents, so I see that they were in the book chronologically. So the first one, 1899 up to 1935. And that's very interesting, because I would say the first half of them I deeply enjoyed. Mum loved all of them, not all of them. There was a couple that we both agreed were stinkers, but The first half of them really, I thought, were funny and romantic. But there was enough humor there's like a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down for the romantic themes. They were often about, especially the first few were about separated couples that got back together. And really well done and wonderfully written. But I would say the second half of the collection, those stories were much too sentimental for me. Not for Mum, so everybody has their own taste in that department. But they weren't awful. I appreciated many things about those last several stories, but they were just a bit, they weren't, for me, just a little bit too sappy for me. But that's okay. I'm glad I read it, and it makes me want to read more of her stuff. My mom has read all of the Anne books and all the other novel series that Montgomery wrote multiple times. And I reread Anne of Green Gables about 6 or 7 years ago, and it really held up. I loved it as an adult. Not too sentimental, but many of these stories in the second half were. Still, your sensitivity might be very different from mine, and certainly Mom really liked almost all of them, more of them than I did, and so it was a big success. And just earlier today, I finally finished a novel. I don't remember when I started it, but it was a long time ago. 4 months ago. But it's one that I didn't ever let sit for more than a few days before I picked it back up again because it was so interesting. And that's Benjamin Wood's penultimate novel, The Ecliptic. And this was awesome. This was a 5-star read, and in a sense it wasn't completely a Sean book, but I loved it. I'm going to give it 5 stars just for its ingenuity and the deep nuances and intellectual appeal. As I've said anytime I've talked about it, it's about a Scottish female artist who is gone to a artist's refuge on a Turkish island, and it's a really elite, secretive thing. The only way you can get in is if somebody who was there before you recommends you. Nobody else can ever get into it. And it's a place for wounded artists of any kind, writer, architect, painter, whatever, that have some mental, emotional, psychological crisis, and they need to get away from the world and heal so that they can get back to making their art, whatever that art is. And so that's how the story opens. And I would say the greatest strength of the novel is the portrayal of the creative process and of art making. Oh my God, does this novel get down into the weeds in a way that made me, who's not deeply into art making. I like looking at art, don't know anything about it, but I like looking at art. But describing to the nth degree this artist's process and the kind of paint that she creates from things she finds in the wild, like mushrooms and various things like that. Oh, it was fascinating. And there was such an intellectual heft to all of that. Oh my God. There were lots of sharp turns in the narrative, surprising turns, especially the ending. I'm not sure that the ending quite worked for me. I think it didn't not work for me to the degree that I would go down to a 4-star read, no. But I think some people would have more of a reaction. I see in Goodreads some people didn't necessarily love the way it ended, and that's fine. I thought it was a tremendously successful novel that was gripping for me to read, made me think a lot about the creative process and about art and therapy. Therapy and psychology is another of the big themes that's explored through the novel. And there's this belief that I've heard many times that art is therapy for artists compared to maybe people who aren't artists. They need therapy, but artists, they work stuff out in their art. And this novel complicates all that in a way that's just deliciously stimulating. I want to read you one paragraph that has no spoilers of any kind about creativity that was one of my favorite passages of the book. Something else you will not learn at art school. Real inspiration turns up only when your invitation has expired. There is no preparation you can put in place for it, and no provision you can make that will entice it to your door. It will find you either sleeping, occupied with chores, or entertaining the dumb neighbors you allowed in as a compromise. And when it finally shows, you will have to wake up fast, abandon everything, turf out the pretenders just to make it welcome. because it will take less time to disappear than you spent waiting for it. There is no finer company than inspiration, but its very goodness will leave you heartsick when it goes. So do not waste time asking it to wipe its feet. Embrace it at the threshold. I think this is a book for anybody who's interested in art, creativity, which is, I think, would be most of us that read literary fiction in one form or another. Tremendously successful. I can't wait to read his next one. I forget the title, but it was long listed for the Booker. Seascraper, I think. In terms of what I didn't necessarily love, the ending I didn't necessarily love, but I wasn't disappointed in it in any way that kind of took away from my enjoyment of the book overall. And the other thing that I would say is the reason it wasn't a Sean book is that I didn't fall in love with any of the characters. I was not emotionally invested in anything. It was purely intellectual. The characters were well drawn, but it just wasn't that kind of a reading experience for me, and that's unusual, and I loved it. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. So that's what I finished. I've started 2. And I said I had more to say about Randy when it comes to reading, which is really funny because Randy hasn't read a book since high school. I don't think Randy probably read a book in high school. He is not a reader. And he had told me about this writer friend of his, and I'd put it out of my mind. But it was funny when he was here, because I said, "You'll have to excuse me, Randy. I have to go downstairs and read to my mom." And he goes, "Huh?" I said, "Yeah, I read to my mom on Facebook Messenger every night, a chapter or 10 pages or whatever." And he said, "Are you serious?" And so I went down and I thought, well, I'm down here, I'll read to Mom, and then I'll read to Mary Jean, and then that's all taken care of. I can come back up and spend the rest of the night with Randy. And when I came back up, he said, "Hey, would you read a book to me? Remember I told you about that writer friend of mine, a quite close friend of his, where he lives? She started a blog writing about queer issues from the perspective of a parent, because her daughter came out to her in the 80s. And I haven't looked up the blog or anything, but it started out as a blog that was just her own personal experience. But then she turned it into a novel and got it published. I think it's self-published, and I used to be really condescending and snobbish about self-published stuff, but I've read some really good stuff that was. He said, "I have it with me, and I don't read. Would you read it to me on Facebook Messenger?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "I can't do it every daily because I've got 2 ladies that I'm taking care of that way, but maybe a couple times a week on the weekend or something." So the next day after he left my house, I started reading it to him. I've just read the first, 10 or 15 pages, and it's good. I'm interested in it. It's very simply told story, and it's novelized, but it's based on the writer's own experience. I guess I should get the title and author in here. It's called Collective Souls by J. Marshall. It's an Irish family that emigrated in the 80s or late 70s. I can't remember, but the bulk of the story happens in the 80s. And that because of the Irish economy at that time, they decided they had to leave Ireland and come to the prairies. And that's all I've read about so far, but it's vivid. The characters, I haven't read enough to be able to say they jump off the page, but they certainly sit up. They seem fully realized so far, and it's quite lovely. And the other one that I told you that I was going to start, I realize now that I'm doing my very traditional Friday Reads, what I finished, what I've started, and that's just the way this Friday Reads is, rather than doing vibes. But boy, am I loving this one so far. This is the one that was written by my mystery guest, All That Belongs, by Dora Dueck, with that fabulous cover. And I read, it was part of my book haul last week, so you can go back and listen to the opening. And the whole rest of what I've now read 2 chapters, are all like that. The writing is incredible. I just love the prose. And the story is starting out very interesting. The protagonist is an archivist, and like her last couple hours on her last shift before she retires, and this is in Winnipeg, I think it's an Australian couple come in and they want to find out something about their distant cousin because he used to live in Manitoba, and she finds a couple things very easily for them. And they have a conversation that's kind of philosophical, kind of psychological about the past and being curious about or exploring the past to understand yourself today and all that stuff. But it's really a sophisticated, fascinating conversation they have that sparks, as she's leaving her career that's all concerned with the past of everybody, her own personal journey with her past. And that, to the degree that I understand it, is about her uncle Must. And there's a whole long spiel that you get in the first chapter, I believe, why that was his nickname, Uncle Must. His real name was Gerhard, I think. But he was a big presence and lived with her parents and her siblings. Uncle Must was there too, farming. And then something happened. They were estranged. And then he died mysteriously. Maybe suicide, maybe just drowning. But he was in a canoe by himself and they never found his body. I don't think any of that's a spoiler because I'm only halfway through chapter 2. But it's really good. The writing, I just love her prose. So it's starting out very promisingly. Mom agrees with me. It's completely fascinating so far, and I'll have more to say when I finished it. And I'm certainly looking forward to having Dora Dueck back on for a deep dive kind of chat. All right, I have 4 more books for a book haul. Here is a fairly hot off the press, like maybe in the last month or 2, I'm not sure exactly. A queer novel by a queer black writer. Palaver by Bryan Washington. And the reason I bought it, even though I already have 2 hardcover books by him on my shelf that I haven't gotten to yet, that Robin suggested we buddy read it. Robin, she's a big friend of this channel, top tier patron, and so we do a couple of buddy reads. Those are the benefits that the top tier people get if they want to. They can have 2 buddy reads with me, and so the first one we're doing is this one. I think it's in April. So that's why I got it. And what I didn't really catch on to until I picked it up is that it's almost entirely set in Japan. So it's a gay black man living in Tokyo. And the author, Bryan Washington, lives in Japan now too. So this is going to be just a fascinating read for me. Just the first line of the blurb thinks it's going to read like my autobiography when I was in Japan. In Tokyo, the son works as an English tutor and drinks his nights away with friends at a gay bar. That sounds about sums up my life. By the time you met me, when I started my channel, I was partnered, and so I wasn't drinking my nights away like I had been as a single person. But anyway, I don't think we need to know any more than that, do we? Palaver is a great word. I'm imagining it has something to do with shooting the shit at the bars. Opening 2 paragraphs. The mother was lost. Each building sat low and square and neutral, dulled in maroons and grays, working against her. This didn't feel like a dangerous situation. Shin Okubo's sidewalks were crowded, even at midday. But everything looked the same, and walking past the same blinking 7-Eleven once again, she realized that her landmarks were fucked. 3 blocks later, she admitted defeat. Still, the mother smiled under her mask at passers-by. A few smiled back, but mostly they walked a little faster. And of course she couldn't ask anyone for directions. A reminder of how thin the line between beauty and chaos could be. I love that last line. And so the mother has come to Japan, this little teacher's mother, and they were estranged, but she comes to visit him. The writing is fabulous. I can't wait to jump into this with Robin in April, I think. Talk about fascinating. This next one I will also be buddy reading right at the beginning of next month with Joe Smith. And this is a book, I don't remember how I found out about it, but it's a book that also came from a blog. And the author is Anne Morgan. It's called Relearning to Read, Adventures in Not Knowing. And oh my God, the premise is fascinating. So it's a book about reading. It just came out maybe a month or 2 ago in the UK from Renard Press. And Anne Morgan, I think she's a published writer in her own right. Let's see. Yes. She has 2 novels published. And she started a blog about reading around the world, which is, what Roz of Scallydandling does so much, and lots of other booktubers do, and I'm interested in reading books from all over the world. Maybe a bit less so than I was, but still interested. I'm finding pay dirt with more stuff closer to home at this time, but that's okay. Things evolve or move around, things shift in my reading life, just like in other aspects thereof. And she blogged about it at ayearofreadingtheworld.com. And one of the main things she was blogging about was this not knowing, reading stuff you don't really understand. You understand the words, but you don't really understand the culture or whatever, the context. You're really lost. And I'll read this bit of the sentence from the back. Anne Morgan plays with what examining the gaps in our understanding and the assumptions we use to plug them can teach us about ourselves and our world. Many books about books celebrate the coziness and consolation of reading. Relearning to read does the opposite. So that just really fascinated me, and I asked Jo if she'd like to buddy read it, and she certainly did. And so we're going to get started. Here is a book from the Furrowed Middlebrow imprint of Dean Street Press, Spam Tomorrow by Verily Anderson. Another, as so many of these are, World War II era novel. I've never read anything by Verily Anderson. Oh, this one was 1956, but I think it's set in the war. And I always love their covers. I guess it opens in World War II with an impromptu wedding, and that's the scene I'm going to read to you, the first couple paragraphs. The author wrote more than 30 books, but her breakthrough was this 1956 novel. And she died in 2010, age 95. So I'm going to see if Mom wants me to read this to her. Long distance call for Bruce. FANY sergeant, soured by the years of peace between the wars, looked into the common room and addressed me in the third person. It can be taken in the office, but must be short. Personal calls are not encouraged during a state of emergency. The state of emergency had been present for 2 months, at any rate in our unit, since the evacuation from Dunkirk. I zipped up my khaki shirt, loosened after lunch, and ran to the telephone. It might be Donald. It was. What size do you take in wedding rings? His voice asked from London. I don't know, darling. Why? Are we going to be married? That's what I should like. Can you get leave? Of course, darling. I would have married Donald any time he asked me, since I first met him a few years before. What about tomorrow? All right, darling, of course. Bruce, the voice at my elbow interrupted, you're on the duty list. Goodbye, I said rather stiffly into the telephone. Till tomorrow then, my love, I heard. The sergeant was eyeing my lack of a collar stud sharply. I replaced the receiver, reluctantly. The last one is the new novel from Neema Shah called A Thread of Light, 2025 book. It was on my most anticipated list. She is a British writer, and her debut, Kololo Hill, I read and very much enjoyed, and this is her second one. It's set in London, or it opens in London, 1941, and it's about a friendship between two women, one of whom is Indian, but I don't know if the other one is. The other one is Ruby, and she's an ARP warden. And she gets immersed in the anti-colonial movement in London through Kitty. And Kitty is a lawyer. Ruby has a secret motives for getting involved, and that all comes out during the story, and that's all I need to know. Opening few lines. Editing Sean here. Well, it's now 10 a.m. on Friday morning. I'm just finishing up editing. I read from this book down in my living room on Wednesday afternoon, and I will be damned if I can find the book. It's somewhere in my house, and I can't believe it's somewhere that I haven't already looked. So I can't make one of my nice little textual overlays, so you just have to watch me reading. Where the heck did I put that book? First thing she did was check for bodies, crawling through what used to be the front hallway, a carpet of debris crunching beneath her palms. A faint drip of liquid somewhere. Hello, is anyone in here? Ruby edged her way further along. Warden's helmet slipped off her head, strap catching on her neck. No answer. Drip, drip. Along here, the hallway was still intact, leading to a kitchen. A brass lamp lay on the wooden floor, chain handle askew, as though it had already surrendered to the enemy. Her torchlight flitted around the shell of the house as she looked for signs of life. That's my book haul. That is my Friday Reads. Last one of the year. I think the next one will be Friday, January 2nd, or is there one in between? December 24th? No. So happy New Year, and I'll see you on January 2nd. Thanks for watching.